The capital planet of Vulnaris Prime did not let anyone forget the war. Even from the height of the Flametail Palace, suspended in the upper atmosphere by gravity weaves and ancient ambition, the scars were visible. Below the pristine white clouds, the surface of the world was a map of old agony. Great blackened craters, miles wide, marred the continents like cigarette burns on a fine painting remnants of the orbital bombardments from the inorganic swarm. Empress Kiora turned away from the transglass window. She adjusted the heavy ceremonial robes that draped over her shoulders. They were woven from silk steel and light thread shimmering with the iridescent orange and gold of her people the Kitsunari. But the weight she felt had nothing to do with the fabric. She walked past the mirror. She avoided looking at her reflection. She knew what she would see: a woman whose beauty was frozen in a mask of regal sorrow. She would see the 9 spectral tails of foxfire flaring behind her, but she would also see that 2 of them, the ones representing her lineage, her daughters, were dim. They were not extinguished, for a mother never truly let go, but they were ghosts of light, pale and wavering, lacking the fierce heat of life. "Your Imperial Majesty," a voice called from the doorway. Kiora paused. It was High Regent Malcor. He stood tall, his own foxfire burning with a disciplined cold blue intensity. He wore the high-collared slate uniform of the Council, a stark contrast to the flowing warmth of the royal attire. "Is it time, High Regent?" Kiora asked. Her voice was steady. She had practiced this tone for 5 years. It was the voice of a ruler who had accepted loss for the greater good. "The galaxy watches, Majesty," Malcor said, stepping into the room with the smooth, predatory grace of a creature that had cleared its territory of rivals. "The Foxfire Conquered is not merely a treaty. It is the final seal on the peace your daughters died to secure. The transmission goes live in 20 minutes. Kiora felt a cold spike in her chest at the mention of them. Princess Elira, Princess Saren, the twin flames. "Do not remind me of the price, Malcor," Kiora said, her eyes narrowing slightly. "I pay it every time I breathe." "I only seek to honor their sacrifice," Malcor replied, bowing his head, though his eyes remained fixed on hers. "The Council believes that formalized control over the sector militias is the only way to ensure the inorganics never return. We need the signature. We need the image of the Empress standing strong, blessing the new order." He walked over to a pedestal, where a holographic projection of the Stormgate, the unstable wormhole where the war had ended, spun slowly. "They saved us all," Malcor whispered, his voice dripping with a reverence that felt manufactured. "When they piloted the twin flame into the singularity to collapse the Stormgate, they became legends. Today, you turn that legend into law." Kiora looked at the hologram. She remembered the day the report came. No bodies, no wreckage, just a sudden cessation of their biosignatures and the collapse of the gate. "I will sign your treaty, Malcor," Kiora said, turning back to the window. "But do not mistake my grief for blindness. I know the Council gains more power today than the throne has held in 1,000 years. "Stability requires strength, Majesty," Malcor said, offering a thin smile. "And strength requires unity." Far away from the gleaming spires of Vulnaris Prime, in the dirty, oil-slicked reality of the galactic rim, Rylan Ward woke up screaming. The sound tore out of his throat before he could stop it, a raw, jagged noise that died quickly in the stale air of his quarters. He sat up, gasping, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. His hands were shaking. He looked down at them, scarred, calloused, stained with grease that never seemed to wash off completely. Human hands. "Damn it," Rylan muttered, rubbing his face. The nightmare was always the same. He was in a cockpit, but not the scrap haulers he fixed for a living. It was advanced, sleek humming with a power that made his teeth ache. The view screen was filled with a swirling vortex of violet and black, the Stormgate. And there were voices. 2 of them, female. They were screaming not in fear, but in exertion, a harmonized cry of pure defiance. "Hold the line," Human One voice commanded. "Don't let go or we all burn," the other pleaded. Then, a blinding flash of white, and the sensation of being torn apart atom by atom. Rylan swung his legs out of the bunk. He was sweating despite the chill of the station. He was just a mechanic on Station 49, a rust bucket orbiting a dead gas giant. That was what his ID said. That was what the station supervisor, a six-eyed insect named Crick, said. "Hey, Ward." Crick's voice buzzed over the intercom, distorted by static. "Stop sleeping. The hydration pumps on Dock 7 are seized again. Fix them, or I deduct the cost from your credits." I'm up, Rylan grumbled at the speaker. "Keep your mandibles on." He stood and walked to the small, reflective panel, bolted to the wall. A man in his early 40s stared back. Graying stubble eyes that looked older than the rest of him, and a mouth that naturally rested in a cynical line. He grabbed his jacket, a heavy, worn canvas coat he had found in a salvage bin 3 years ago. It had a patch on the shoulder he had stitched himself, a crude approximation of a symbol he remembered from a dream, a fox with 9 tails. He didn't know why he wore it. It felt like a joke he didn't understand. Rylan Ward. No family, no history before 5 years ago. Just a man who woke up in a drifting escape pod with a headache that spanned the galaxy, and a set of skills for fixing engines that no civilian mechanic should possess. "Just a lucky grunt," Rylan whispered to his reflection, repeating his daily mantra. "Survivor of some skirmish I can't remember." Nothing more. But as he reached for his hydrospanner, a wave of dizziness hit him. It wasn't the usual hangover from the cheap synthetic alcohol he drank to sleep. It was a pull, a physical tug in his chest, like a hook caught behind his sternum. The voices from the dream came back, not as a memory, but as a whisper in the room. "We are close. Wake up, Rylan." He dropped the spanner. It clattered loudly on the metal deck. "This is crazy," he said aloud. "I need to see a doctor. A real one, not that butcher in the medbay." But he knew it wasn't a sickness. He looked out the viewport of his quarters. The stars were stretching. Not literally, but in his mind. He could feel a path opening a line of fire connecting him to something impossibly far away. And then the station shook. Not from an impact, but from a displacement wave. A massive ship had just exited hyperspace nearby. But Rylan knew with a terrifying certainty that the ship wasn't coming to the station. He was already on it. The reality of the station dissolved. The smell of stale air and grease vanished, replaced by the scent of ozone and burning circuitry. Rylan gasped, falling to his knees, but his knees didn't hit the dirty deck of his quarters. They hit the pristine, vibrating floor of a starship bridge. He looked up. He wasn't on Station 49 anymore. He hadn't been for weeks. That life, the mechanic, the insectoid boss, that was the memory. He was remembering where he had been when they found him. "Steady, Rylan," a voice said. Rylan blinked, forcing the timeline in his head to align. He was on the bridge of the Twin Flame. He was wearing his old coat, but beneath it, he wore patched-together combat armor. Standing before him were 2 figures who dominated the room, even though they were exhausted, their armor, scored by plasma burns and cosmic dust. Princess Alera, Princess Saren. They were alive. And he was the one who had hot-wired the navigation drive to get them out of the pocket dimension inside the Stormgate. "We are breaking orbit," Saren said. She was the cooler of the two, her fox fire, a pale, icy blue, though now it flickered with exhaustion. She tapped a console with fingers that ended in sharp, elegant claws. "Vulnaris Prime is ahead. The shielding is failing. If they have the defense grid active, they might shoot us down before we can hail them." Alera turned to him. Her fire was warmer, a vibrant gold, but her eyes were hard. "Are you with us, human? The jump sickness, it hits you harder than us." Rylan shook his head, clearing the last of the phantom life at the scrap station. "I'm here, I'm good. Just remembering how quiet it was being nobody." You were never a nobody, Alira said, her voice softening for a fraction of a second. You were the anchor. Don't call me that, Rylan said, standing up and grabbing the pilot's yoke. It was made for Kitsunari hands, slightly too large for him, but he had modified the grip with friction tape. I'm just the driver, and I suggest you hold on to something. We're dropping out of Super Cruise right on top of your mother's front lawn. The Foxfire conquered, Saren noted, looking at the tactical display. They are broadcasting. The whole fleet is there. Good, Rylan said, a grim smile touching his lips. I always hated crashing parties quietly. The grand plaza of the Flametail Palace was a sea of light. 100,000 citizens stood in ordered ranks, their own minor Foxfire auras, creating a rolling ocean of color. Above them, floating drones broadcast the image to 1,200 inhabited worlds. On the high dais, Empress Kiora stood before the golden table. High Regent Malcor stood beside her, holding the stylus that would sign the conquered. With this signature, Malcor projected his voice, amplified by the acoustics of the crystal architecture. We ensure that the sacrifice of the twin flames was not in vain. We bind our worlds together in eternal security. Kiora reached for the stylus. Her hand trembled, barely visible to the cameras, but clear to Malcor. For the future, Malcor prompted gently, his eyes cold. Kiora took the stylus. She touched the tip to the digital parchment. Boom! The sound was not an explosion, but the violent displacement of air, caused by a massive object, forcing its way into real space, without deceleration protocols. The sky above the palace tore open. It wasn't the smooth blue transition of a scheduled arrival. It was a jagged wound of violet lightning. Clouds were vaporized instantly. A ship plummeted from the rift. It was ancient, a design that hadn't been produced since the height of the war. Its hull was scorched black, pitted with impact craters, and one of its stabilizer fins was sheared off completely. It screamed down through the atmosphere, trailing fire and ionization. Attack! Malcor roared, stepping in front of the Empress, though his first instinct was clearly to check his own escape route. Defense grid, shoot it down! Wait! Kiora screamed. She felt it, a resonance in her chest, a flare of heat in the two dim phantom tails behind her. Hold fire, belay that order. The defense turrets on the palace spires tracked the falling ship, locking on. The green targeting lasers painted the battered hull. It is a suicide run, Malcor shouted. Fire, I am the Empress, Kiora's voice, amplified, fueled by a sudden surge of foxfire that turned her aura blindingly bright. I command you to hold. The gunners hesitated. In that second of hesitation, the ship fired its retro thrusters. The sound was deafening, a mechanical shriek of stressed metal. The ship leveled out mere 300 feet above the crowd, the wash from its engines knocking over banners and sending dignitaries scrambling for cover. With a groan of hydraulics, the ship slammed onto the landing deck at the far end of the plaza, skidding for 200 yards, tearing up the ceremonial marble tiles, before coming to a smoking halt. Silence descended on the plaza. The only sound was the hiss of cooling metal and the hum of the drone cameras zooming in. The council guards rushed forward, weapons raised. Malcor stood frozen, his mind racing. That silhouette. He knew that ship class. But it was impossible. The rear ramp of the ship hissed. It lowered slowly, jamming halfway, before falling with a heavy clang. Smoke billowed out from the interior. First, a figure stepped out. Tall, lithe, wearing combat armor that looked like it had been through a grinder. Her helmet was gone. Her hair was a tangled mane of silver, and behind her 5 tails of golden foxfire blazed with a ferocity that made the palace lights look dim. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Then a second figure. Identical in height, but her fire was blue, sharp, and intense. She limped slightly, favoring her left leg, but her posture was unbroken. Princess Alira, Princess Saren. Impossible, Malcor whispered, his face draining of color. They are dead. The storm gate crushed them. Kiora took a step forward, her hands covering her mouth. Tears streamed down her face, defying royal protocol. But the princesses did not step forward alone. From the shadows of the ship's hold, a third figure emerged. He was shorter than the Kitsunari, broader in the shoulders. He wore no sleek armor, only a battered, grease-stained canvas coat over patched fatigues. He walked with a heavy, tired gait. He stepped into the light, blinking against the glare of the plaza. A human. A murmur of confusion rippled through the crowd. Humans were laborers, mercenaries, technicians. They did not stand on the royal landing deck. They certainly did not stand beside the lost princesses. Rylan Ward looked at the thousands of faces staring at him. He looked at the guards with their leveled weapons. He looked up at the dais where the Empress stood frozen. He reached up and scratched the back of his neck, looking incredibly out of place. Elira stepped forward, her voice ringing out clear and strong, amplified by her own bioenergy. "Lower your weapons," she commanded. The guards hesitated, looking to Malcor. "I said lower them," Saren added, her voice cutting like a whip. "Mother," Elira called out, looking directly at Kiora. "We have returned." She gestured to the man beside her. Rylan shifted his weight, uncomfortable, sensing the target painted on his back. "And we would have been lost to the dark forever," Elira continued, "if not for this man. Rylan Ward, the human veteran who led us back from the storm gate." The silence that followed was absolute. Kiora broke it. She abandoned dignity. She ran. She ran down the grand stairs, ignoring the cries of her attendants, her robes flying behind her. She crossed the ruined plaza, stumbling over the broken tiles. Elira Saren. The twins met her halfway. The embrace was violent in its desperation. Kiora fell to her knees, pulling her daughters down with her, burying her face in their armor, sobbing with a sound that echoed across the global broadcast. Rylan stood back, giving them space. He felt like an intruder in a private moment, yet he couldn't leave. He felt the eyes of the High Regent on him. Malcor was still on the dais, staring down with a look that wasn't relief. It was a calculation. It was fear. Rylan met Malcor's gaze. He didn't bow. He didn't look away. He just adjusted his coat. "Well," Rylan muttered to himself, the old survivor's instinct screaming in his gut. "We survived the wormhole. Now, let's see if we survived the welcome party." Malcor stepped up to the microphone. He was a master of improvisation. He forced a smile onto his face, though it didn't reach his eyes. "A miracle," Malcor proclaimed, spreading his arms. "The Foxfire Lattice has blessed us. Our prayers are answered." But as the crowd began to cheer, confused, but swept up in the emotion, Malcor tapped his comms link, speaking on a sub-vocal frequency to his head of security. "Secure the perimeter. Isolate the human. I want to know how a mechanic piloted a royal warship out of a singularity. And then I want him gone." Down on the plaza, Elira pulled back from her mother. Her face was streaked with soot and tears. "The Concord Mother," Elira said, her voice urgent. "Did you sign it?" Kiora shook her head, bewildered. "No, not yet." "Good," Saren said, looking up at Malcor with cold hatred. "Do not sign it. The war didn't end the way they told you." Kiora looked at her daughters, then at the human, standing awkwardly behind them, and finally up at Malcor. The grief that had clouded her mind for 5 years began to lift, replaced by a sudden sharp clarity. She stood up. She wiped her face. She looked at the cameras. "The signing is cancelled," Kiora announced. Her voice was not the shaky whisper of a grieving mother anymore. It was the voice of the Empress. "The Foxfire Concord is suspended indefinitely." "We have much to discuss." Malcor froze. The pen dropped from his hand. Rylan watched the political tectonic plates shift in real time. He saw the guards tightening their grip on their rifles. He saw the look Saren gave Malcor, a look of war. He felt a headache building behind his eyes again. A flash of memory, Malcor's voice, on a distorted channel 5 years ago, ordering the gate to be overloaded. Rylan rubbed his temples. He had thought coming back was the hard part. He was wrong. "Hey, Princess," Rylan whispered to Alira as the crowd roared with a mixture of shock and joy. "I think your regent wants to kill me." Alira stepped closer to him, her foxfire flaring up to encompass him in its warmth, a protective gesture that shocked the traditionalists in the crowd even more. "Let him try," Alira said, her hand resting on the hilt of her energy blade. "You carried us through hell, Rylan. We are not letting you fall now." Rylan looked at the palace, a beautiful cage of light and crystal. He sighed, a long, weary sound. "Great," he said. "Out of the frying pan into the fire." He looked at the symbol, stitched on his shoulder. The 9-tailed fox. It feels heavier now. He had the distinct feeling that he wasn't just a mechanic anymore. He was a loose end that refused to be cut. And as he looked at the reunited royal family, he realized with a sinking heart that he actually cared what happened to them. Just a lucky grunt, he tried to tell himself again. But for the first time in 5 years, he didn't believe it. The council chamber of the Flametail Palace was designed to intimidate. The walls were not made of stone or metal, but of suspended hard light panels that pulsed with the slow, rhythmic heartbeat of the planetary defense grid. In the center of the room, a massive obsidian table dominated the space, its surface slick and dark like an oil spill. Rylan Ward stood at one end of the table. He felt exposed. His canvas coat, still smelling of the grease from Station 49, was a stark offense against the pristine aesthetics of the room. To his left stood Princess Alira and Princess Saren, their armor polished but still bearing the deep scratches of their return journey. To his right sat Empress Kiora, her face a mask of porcelain fragility. And at the head of the table stood High Regent Malcor. "We must establish the facts before we address the public again," Malcor said. His voice was smooth like velvet wrapped around a razor blade. The confusion at the landing platform was understandable. Emotions were high, but emotions do not govern empires. Records do. Malcor tapped the table surface. A hologram flickered into existence between them. It was a grainy, chaotic recording labeled Stormgate Incident, Official Archive, Battle Log 904. Rylan watched a knot of dread tightening in his stomach. On the display, the bridge of the twin flame appeared. It was chaos. Alarms were flashing red. The view screen showed the swirling violet maw of the singularity. In the center of the frame, a human figure, unmistakably Rylan, was shouting. "We have to bail out!" The holographic Rylan screamed, panic distorting his face. "I am not dying for this! I am engaging the escape pods!" The recording shifted. It showed the human, shoving a crew member aside, scrambling for the airlock, while the two princesses stood their ground, their foxfire flaring as they manually held the navigation locks. Then, the ship shuddered, the feed cut to static, and the final log entry scrolled across the bottom. Human conscript ward desertion confirmed. Status Kia, during ejection. The hologram faded. Silence hung heavy in the room. "That," Malcor said, folding his hands behind his back, "is the truth documented by the ship's own black box. You panicked, Mr. Ward. You tried to flee. The princesses died, or were presumed dead, trying to correct the navigational errors you caused." Rylan stared at the empty space where the hologram had been. He felt a wave of nausea. The images looked real. The sound of his own voice, screaming in terror, sounded real. For a second, the doubt that had plagued him for 5 years clawed at his throat. Is that what happened? Is that why I don't remember? Did I run lies? A voice cut through the silence like a whip crack. Princess Alira stepped forward. Her golden tails bristled, the fur standing on end, glowing with a furious heat. "That recording is a forgery," Alira stated, her eyes locking onto Malcor. Rylan did not run. He was at the helm. He locked the blast doors from the inside to prevent the crew from trying to stop us. Memory is a fragile thing, Highness, Malcor said, his tone patronizingly gentle. Trauma often rewrites history to make it bearable. You have been gone for 5 years. The mind fills in the gaps with heroism, where there was only fear. And what of my mind? Princess Saren asked. She did not shout. She stood perfectly still, her blue foxfire burning, with a cold, controlled intensity. I do not forget variables, High Regent. I remember the command codes Rylan entered. They were not escape protocols. They were synchronization algorithms for the Foxfire lattice. Saren turned to Rylan, her expression softening, just enough for him to see. Do not let him gaslight you, Rylan. You were there. Rylan closed his eyes. He tried to force his brain to push past the fog. Flashback. The smell of burning ozone. The scream of the hull stress. Malcor's voice on the comms, distorted by distance, but clear in intent. The asset is lost. Initiate Protocol Omega. Burn the sector. Burn 9. Burn 9 meant total incineration. It meant killing the princesses to seal the gate. Rylan's hands on the yoke. They were shaking, but not from fear. From the vibration of the ship. He looked at Alira. She was crying, not tears, but liquid light. Saren was bleeding from her nose, her mental shields cracking under the pressure of the wormhole. I am not burning anything, Rylan had growled. He slammed his fist onto the override. We are going in. We are closing it from the throat. He didn't run. He grabbed the interface cables, the ones meant for Kitsunari physiology, the ones that would boil a human nervous system. Don't! Alira screamed. Shut up and drive! Rylan had yelled back, and he jammed the jacks into the ports on his suit. Pain. White, blinding, infinite pain. End flashback. Rylan opened his eyes. He let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. The memory was jagged, incomplete, but it was there. I didn't run, Rylan said. His voice was low, raspy, but steady. He looked Malcor in the eye. And I didn't use the escape pods. If I had, I would have drifted into the gravity well. I stayed. I plugged into the lattice interface. Malcor raised an eyebrow, a flicker of genuine annoyance crossing his face. A human plugging into a royal Foxfire interface that is biologically impossible. You would be ash in 3 seconds. That, Empress Kiora spoke up for the first time, her voice trembling with a mix of hope and terror, is what we must determine. She gestured to the side door. The Oracle is waiting. If he touches the lattice, the marks will be on his soul, not just his skin. The medical sanctum was less of a hospital and more of a cathedral dedicated to biology. Incense that smelled of antiseptic and sandalwood filled the air. Dr. Nyx, the Imperial Oracle, moved around the biobed where Rylan sat shirtless. Dr. Nyx was an old Kitsunari, his fur gone gray, his 3 remaining tails flickering with the dim light of embers. He held a scanner that looked like a jagged crystal shard over Rylan's chest. Alira and Saren stood in the corner watching. Kiora remained outside, unable to bear the tension. Interesting, Dr. Nyx murmured. He adjusted his spectacles. Very interesting. Is good interesting, or you have 3 hours to live interesting? Rylan asked, trying to pull his coat back on. He felt naked without it, and not just physically. The scars on his torso were a roadmap of bad decisions, but the one over his heart was new. It looked like a starburst, pale white against his skin. The official narrative says you cannot interface with Foxfire because you lack the resonant nodes in your nervous system, Dr. Nyx said, tapping the crystal. And, structurally, that is true. You are human. Your biology is linear dense and non-conductive to spiritual energy. The doctor pressed the crystal against the starburst scar. A hum filled the room. The scar glowed. Not white, but a swirling mix of gold and blue, the colors of the twins. Rylan winced as a jolt of heat shot through his spine. However, Dr. Nyx continued, stepping back, it appears that during the event your body was forced to adapt. You acted as a ground wire, a living fuse. The massive energy surge from the princesses didn't kill you because it changed you. Changed me how? Rylan asked, rubbing his chest. You are Foxfire resonant, Saren said, her voice heavy. She stepped out of the shadows. It means you are no longer just biological matter to the lattice. You are part of the circuit. I don't want to be a battery, Rylan snapped, sliding off the bed. I just want to get paid for the salvage job I apparently did 5 years ago, and go back to a place where the biggest problem is a leaky hydraulic pump. You cannot go back, Alira said softly. She walked over to him, her presence radiating a physical warmth that made the hair on Rylan's arms stand up. Malcor knows. That is why he faked the footage. If the galaxy knows a human can channel Foxfire, the entire doctrine of Kitsunari supremacy collapses. You are not just a veteran, Rylan. You are proof that they are wrong. Rylan looked at the three of them. The old doctor, the cold strategist, the fiery warrior. I am a mechanic, Rylan insisted, though the conviction was fading. I fix things that are broken. The Empire is broken, Saren said. Fix it. The days that followed were a blur of confinement, disguised as hospitality. Rylan was given quarters in the East Wing, far from the public eye, guarded by soldiers loyal to Kiora. But the isolation did little to stop the whispers. He spent his mornings in the training garden with Alira. It was a secluded courtyard, filled with trees that wept luminous sap. Focus, Alira commanded. She stood 10 feet away, holding a training sphere that hummed with kinetic energy. The energy is not in your muscles. It is in the memory of the pain. Pull on it. I feel ridiculous, Rylan grumbled. He stood with his feet apart, hands out, trying to summon the energy Dr. Nix claimed was there. I feel like I am trying to pass a kidney stone. Alira chuckled, a sound that was surprisingly musical. You are too tense. Humans are always so rigid. You think of time as a line. Past, present, future. Foxfire is a web. Everything is happening at once. She walked over to him. She didn't stop until she was inside his personal space. She reached out and took his right hand, placing her other hand on his chest, directly over the scar. Close your eyes, she whispered. Rylan did. He smelled ozone and wildflowers, her scent. Remember the gate, she said. Not the fear, the connection. You held my hand then too. Flashback. The cockpit was dissolving, gravity was gone. Rylan couldn't tell where his hand ended, and the ship began. Alira was screaming, her life force draining into the navigation computer. Rylan grabbed her hand. It burned, but he didn't let go. I got you, he gritted out. I got you, princess. The energy rushed into him. It felt like drinking liquid sun. He became the anchor. He dug his heels into reality and held them both back from the void. End flashback. Rylan's eyes snapped open. A flare of golden light erupted from his palm, swirling around Alira's hand. It didn't burn. It danced. For a moment, they just stood there, the light pulsing between them like a shared heartbeat. Alira's tails slowly curled inward, brushing against Rylan's legs. It was an intimate gesture, one he knew enough about xenoanthropology to understand was significant. You held on, Alira whispered, looking up at him, her golden eyes wide. You never let go. I am stubborn, Rylan said, his voice rough. The tension between them was thick, electric. He wanted to lean in. He could see she wanted it too. Good, she said, stepping back suddenly, the moment breaking but the air still charged. Stubbornness keeps you alive. Now do it again, without the sentimental look on your face. If mornings were for physical torture with Alira, afternoons were for mental dissection with Saren. They sat in her private solarium overlooking the smog-choked industrial districts far below the palace clouds. Saren was teaching him how to survive the court. Malcor will not kill you publicly, Saren said, moving a glass piece on a 3-dimensional chessboard. He needs you to be discredited first. He needs the public to see a savage, incompetent human who tricked the princesses. I have a face for radio and the manners of a junkyard dog, Rylan said, slouching in the velvet chair. He won't have to work hard. Sit up, Saren commanded, tapping the table with her fan. And stop deflecting with humor. It is a defense mechanism. It is a personality trait, Rylan corrected, sitting up. It is armor, Saren countered. Her blue eyes analyzed him, dissecting him. You use jokes to tell people you are harmless, so they won't look closer. But you are dangerous, Rylan. You are the only human in history to look into the Stormgate and blink last. She leaned forward. When you face the Council again, you cannot be the rough veteran. You must be the weary guardian. You must look at them with pity, not anger. Pity? Yes. Pity them for not understanding what you saw. Saren stood and walked behind his chair. She placed her hands on his shoulders. Her touch was cooler than Illyra's grounding. Malcor wants to sell fear. You must sell the truth. And the truth is sad, Rylan. The truth is that we almost died because of their ambition. Rylan looked at her reflection in the glass window. You are scary when you calculate things you know that I know, Saren said, a small, genuine smile touching her lips. That is why Illyra is the sword, and I am the hand that wields it. And you. I am the whetstone, Rylan suggested. You are the hand that catches the blade when it falls, Saren said softly. You saved us both. Illyra loves you for your bravery. I appreciate you for the logic. You saw that dying was inefficient, so you found a third option. Rylan remained silent. He realized then that the twins were not two halves of a whole. They were two complete forces, and he was somehow balancing between them. He liked Illyra's fire, but he respected Saren's ice, and he was starting to realize that he would fight the whole galaxy to keep either of them from burning out again. The peace did not last. The galaxy outside the palace walls was churning. News of the human veteran had leaked. The reactions were volatile. In the lower districts where humans and other non-Kitsunari lived, Rylan was being hailed as a messiah figure, a symbol that the lower castes could stand with gods. But in the high spires, the purity factions were enraged. Rylan was walking down one of the main corridors, heading toward the royal archives to meet Kiora, when he was intercepted. 5 guards wearing the crimson sashes of the Foxfire Purists, an extremist faction loyal to Malcor, blocked his path. Lost human, the leader sneered. He was a massive Kitsunari with scars across his snout. The service elevators are in the back. Just passing through, Rylan said, keeping his hands visible and open. Nice sashes. Very slimming. You defile this palace with your breath, the leader spat. He shoved Rylan hard. Rylan stumbled back but didn't raise his fists. He remembered Saren's words. Pity them. I am not looking for a fight, Rylan said calmly. You don't get to choose, the leader growled. He ignited an energy baton and swung it at Rylan's head. Rylan didn't block it. He dodged a simple sidestep, learned from 2 decades of bar fights and salvage squabbles. The baton smashed into the wall. You are fast for a monkey, the guard snarled. But you are alone. The other 4 guards stepped forward, drawing their weapons. Rylan sighed. I really hate this part. He was about to brace for a beating. He couldn't fight back, not without causing a diplomatic incident, when the air temperature dropped 20 degrees. He is not alone, a voice said. Princess Saren stepped out from the adjacent hallway. She wasn't wearing armor. She was wearing a diplomatic gown, but the look in her eyes was lethal. Princess, the leader stammered, lowering his weapon. We were just escorting the intruder. You were assaulting a guest of the throne, Saren said. She didn't raise her voice, but the foxfire around her flared, casting long, sharp shadows. And not just a guest. The man who carried my sister and me out of the void, while you were polishing your boots in the safety of the barracks. The guards shrank back. Leave, Saren commanded, before I have you reassigned to waste reclamation on the outer moons. The guards scrambled away. Rylan exhaled, leaning against the wall. I had it handled. You were going to let them break your ribs, Saren noted, walking over to him. She inspected him for injuries with a critical eye. Broken ribs heal, Rylan said, shrugging. A human beating up royal guards that creates a riot. I listened to your lecture. Saren looked at him surprised. Then she reached out and straightened the collar of his battered coat. You are a good student, Rylan Ward, she said. But next time break one of their noses. It is good for morale. The conspirators met in a sound-proofed bunker deep beneath the capital. High Regent Malcor sat at the head of a table, surrounded by 3 generals and the CEO of the largest weapon manufacturing guild in the sector. The narrative is slipping, General Kale said, slamming his fist on the table. The troops are asking questions. They want to know why the deserter is living in the East Wing. Humans are a problem, the CEO added. But the real problem is the lattice. Since their return, the energy readings have been erratic. It is as if the system is rejecting our override codes. Malcor stared at the display of the palace. The human is a catalyst. He is waking up parts of the lattice that should have remained dormant. If he fully syncs with the twins, they could access the core logs. They will see everything. The order to purge the gate, the falsified casualty reports, the trade deals we made with the inorganics to secure the border. So we kill him, General Kale said. No, Malcor said. Martyrs are dangerous. If we kill him now, he becomes a saint. We need him to fail. We need him to be the instrument of his own destruction. Malcor pulled up a schematic of the Foxfire testing chamber. Tomorrow, the Empress has ordered a full resonance test. She wants to prove to the Council that the human is resonant. Malcor said, a cruel smile forming. We will adjust the limiters on the conduction coils. When he plugs in the feedback loop, won't just reject him. It will overload. It will look like his fragile human body couldn't handle the divine power. He will burn. And in his panic, he will discharge energy that threatens the princesses. And then, the CEO asked. And then, Malcor said, we will be forced to put him down to save the royal family. Tragically, of course. The Foxfire testing chamber was a circular arena lined with dampening fields. In the center stood the resonator, a towering spire of crystal and copper. Rylan stood at the base of the spire. He was shirtless again, wires attached to his chest, temples, and wrists. The gallery above was packed. The entire council was there. Kiora sat in the royal box, her hands gripping the railing. Are you ready, Mr. Ward? Dr. Nix's voice boomed over the intercom. As I will ever be, Rylan muttered. He looked at Alara and Saren, who stood on the safety perimeter. They gave him nodding encouragement. Initiating low-level connection, Nix announced. The spire hummed. A beam of soft orange light connected with the wires on Rylan's chest. It felt warm, pleasant even, like sitting near a campfire. Rylan breathed in, letting the energy flow. He felt the vastness of the lattice, a billion voices, a billion memories swirling in a digital spiritual ocean. Resonance is stable, Nix reported, sounding relieved. Increasing throughput to 20%. The hum grew louder. The light intensified. Up in the control booth, a technician, loyal to Malcor, typed a command into his console. Override safety. Surge protocol maximum. Suddenly, the campfire turned into a supernova. Rylan screamed. His back arched as a torrent of raw power slammed into him. It wasn't the gentle flow of the twins. This was jagged, angry energy. Something is wrong, Alara shouted. Cut the power! Controls are locked, Dr. Nix yelled, frantically typing. It is a feedback loop. The spire is dumping the planetary reserve into him. Sparks flew from the dampening fields. The wires on Rylan's skin began to smoke. He is going to explode, a council member shouted. Rylan couldn't hear them. He was burning. He was back in the storm gate, but this time there was no hand to hold. He felt the energy tearing his cells apart. "Let go," a voice whispered in his head. "Just let go and die." He looked up. Through the haze of pain, he saw Alira running toward him. "Stay back!" Rylan gasped. "It's a trap." She didn't stop. She dove through the safety field, her own foxfire flaring to shield her. Saren was right behind her, hacking into the spire's manual interface with her datapad. "Rylan, look at me!" Alira shouted, grabbing his face. Her hands burned him, but it grounded him. "Don't fight it, channel it!" "Too much," Rylan gritted out. The energy was building up in his chest, a bomb, waiting to go off. "Redirect it!" Saren yelled, her fingers flying across the pad. "I am opening a vent in the ceiling grid. Rylan, aim up, push it out." Rylan looked up at the dome ceiling. He focused on the pain. He focused on the anger at Malcor, at the war, at the universe that kept trying to kill him. He roared a sound that was half human, half energy discharge. A pillar of blinding white fire erupted from his body. It didn't hit Alira. It shot straight up, smashing through the containment roof, punching a hole through the palace levels, and shooting into the sky like a beacon. The spire shattered. The wires disintegrated. Rylan collapsed. Alira caught him before he hit the floor. "I have you. I have you." Smoke curled from Rylan's skin. He coughed, spitting out blood. He looked up at the gallery. Malcor was standing there, his face unreadable but his fists clenched. "Did I?" Rylan wheezed. "Did I pass the test?" Saren knelt beside them, looking at the shattered crystal spire. "You survived an assassination attempt, Rylan. That is the only test that matters in this palace." That night, the royal quarters were locked down. Kiora dismissed her guards, trusting only her daughters and the human. They sat in the Empress's private study. The mood was grim. "It was Malcor," Saren said, throwing a data chip on the table. "I traced the override command. It came from a terminal with his encryption signature. He tried to cook Rylan alive." Kiora covered her face with her hands. "He has gone too far. He is willing to kill inside the palace." "He is scared," Rylan said. He was bandaged from waist to neck, sitting stiffly on a sofa. "He knows that if I remember everything, he is finished." "We cannot wait for an investigation," Alira said, pacing the room. Her tail twitched with agitation. "The council owns the judges. They will rule it an accident." "Then we do not use the judges," Rylan said. He looked at the Empress. "The Foxfire conquered. You haven't rescheduled it yet." "I was planning to cancel it permanently," Kiora said. "No," Rylan said, leaning forward, wincing as his burns stretched. "Reschedule it. Make it bigger. Invite every world. Tell Malcor you are ready to sign." "Why?" Kiora asked, confused. "Because it is a live broadcast," Saren realized, her eyes widening. She looked at Rylan with newfound respect. "A stage he cannot control." "Exactly," Rylan said. "We go out there. We pretend to play along. And when the cameras are rolling, when the whole galaxy is watching, we show them the truth. We show them the real logs from the Stormgate." "It is high treason," Kiora whispered, "to hijack a sacred ceremony, to accuse the High Regent without a trial. If we fail, it is a civil war." "If we do nothing, it is slavery," Alira said firmly. She went to her mother and took her hand. "Mother, you spent 5 years mourning us. Do not spend the next 5 years mourning your empire." Kiora looked at her daughters. She looked at the scars on their faces. She looked at the human veteran, broken and burned, who had refused to die. Slowly, the Empress straightened her back. The dim foxfire of her lineage flared just a little brighter. "Very well," Kiora said. "Summon the High Regent. Tell him the Empress is ready to sign his treaty." Rylan leaned back, closing his eyes. He was tired. His body felt like it had been run through a plasma thresher. But for the first time, the path was clear. "One last mission," he whispered to himself. "Then I am definitely asking for a raise." The Foxfire Plaza was not merely a gathering place. It was a nervous system, made of stone and light. Stretching out from the base of the Flametail Palace, the plaza was a vast expanse of polished obsidian, etched with geometric channels that glowed with the ambient energy of the planet. Tonight, however, the glow was not ambient. It was blinding. 100,000 soldiers stood in formation, their armor polished to a mirror sheen, each one generating a low-level foxfire aura. From high above, looking down from the palace balconies, the square looked like a lake of burning orange liquid. Above, the soldiers hovering recording drones buzzed like angry hornets, beaming the feed to 1,200 colonized worlds. Billions of eyes were watching. Rylan Ward stood behind the heavy velvet curtains of the royal balcony, adjusting the straps of his armor. It was a strange piece of kit. Princess Saren had designed it, and the royal armory had fabricated it in less than 24 hours. It was a hybrid. The chest plate was standard human-issue ceramic composite, dull, scarred practical. But the pauldrons and the gauntlets were kitsunari weave shimmering with circuitry, designed to channel bioenergy. "It looks ridiculous," Rylan muttered, tapping the glowing conduit on his wrist. "I look like a scavenger who robbed a museum." "You look like a bridge," Princess Alira said. She stood beside him, adjusting her own ceremonial armor. It was gold and white, terrified in its beauty, but she had insisted on keeping her combat blade at her hip. "Half iron, half light. That is what they need to see." "They are going to see a target," Rylan replied, though he didn't pull away when she brushed a speck of dust from his shoulder. Princess Saren walked over, holding a data pad. Her expression was tight, her blue eyes scanning the data streams from the plaza below. "Malcor has positioned the Imperial Guard in a suppression ring around the dais," Saren said quietly. "He claims it is for our protection against radical elements, but the firing arcs are optimized to target the stage, not the crowd." "He is expecting a fight," Kiora said. The Empress stepped out of the shadows. She looked regal, terrifyingly so. Her 9 tails were fully flared, though 2 remained spectral and dim. She wore the crown of the First Flame, a heavy artifact that hummed with power. "Then, let us give him one. Are you ready, Rylan?" Rylan took a deep breath. He checked the pistol at his hip, a human kinetic weapon, loud and messy. He hoped he wouldn't have to use it. "I am just the mechanic," Rylan said, forcing a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "I am just here to make sure the engine doesn't stall." "Time to go," Alira said. The trumpets sounded a deep, resonant note that vibrated in the chest. The curtains parted. The roar of the crowd was a physical force. It hit them like a wall of wind. 100,000 voices screaming in a mixture of adoration, confusion, and fear. Kiora walked first, head high. The twins followed, flanking her perfectly. And then Rylan walked out. The cheer faltered. It didn't die, but it fractured. A ripple of murmurs spread through the ocean of soldiers and civilians. The cameras zoomed in. The face of a human, scarred and weary, projected onto holographic screens the size of skyscrapers across the city. They reached the central dais. High Regent Malcor was waiting. He stood at the podium, his hands resting on the control surface of the Foxfire lattice interface. He smiled as they approached, but his eyes were flat, dead things. "Your Majesty," Malcor said, his voice amplified to boom across the plaza. "You grace us, and you bring guests." He looked at Rylan with a mixture of amusement and disgust. "The hero of the hour," Malcor said. "The galaxy waits to hear the truth." "Then let us sign the Concord," Kiora said, stepping toward the signing table. "And let us end this charade." Malcor did not move aside. Instead, he tapped a command on the podium. "I agree, Majesty," Malcor said. "The charade must end." Above the plaza, the massive holographic screens shifted. The image of the royal family vanished. In its place appeared a rotating dossier. It was red, stamped with the seal of the High Council. "Urgent intelligence report. The Ward deception." The crowd gasped. "Citizens of the Empire," Malcor shouted, his voice turning sharp, abandoning the pretense of politeness. We have been deceived. For days we have been told a fairy tale, a tale of a human savior who rescued our beloved princesses. But the Council has uncovered the dark reality. Rylan tensed. Here it comes, he thought. The human known as Rylan Ward is not a hero, Malcor bellowed, pointing a finger at Rylan. He is a saboteur, a sleeper agent for the human coalition who infiltrated the Twin Flame 5 years ago. He did not save the princesses. He kidnapped them. A wave of shock rolled through the plaza. On the screens, doctored footage began to play. It showed Rylan holding a weapon to Alira's head on the bridge. It showed him sabotaging the engine core. The editing was flawless. Even Rylan, watching it, felt a flicker of doubt at how real it looked. He used a neural scrambler to confuse their memories. Malcor continued riding the wave of the crowd's anger. He dragged them into the storm gate to hold them hostage, but the radiation trapped them. Now he returns using our own mercy against us to place a human puppet master behind the throne. Liar, Alira screamed, stepping forward, her hand going to her sword. Do not move, princess, Malcor shouted, or the defense grid will interpret it as a hostile act by your captor. Red targeting lasers snapped into existence. Hundreds of them. They didn't aim at Alira. They all converged on Rylan. A web of red light painted his chest, his face, his heart. The crowd was screaming now, demanding blood. Kill the human, save the Empress. Rylan stood very still. He could feel the heat of the laser sights on his skin. He looked at Saren. She was calculating, her eyes darting around the plaza, looking for a way out. There was none. Rylan, Kiora whispered, her voice trembling. I can order them to stand down. They won't listen, Rylan said softly. He has the override codes. Look at his hand. Malcor's hand was hovering over a red panel on the podium. The emergency martial law actuator. Defend yourself, human, Malcor taunted, his voice dripping with triumph. Tell them your lies. Let us see if they believe a mechanic over their high regent. Rylan stepped past the princesses. He walked to the edge of the dais, fully into the spotlight, fully into the crosshairs of 1,000 rifles. He didn't draw his gun. He reached into his coat pocket. The guards flinched, fingers tightening on triggers. Rylan pulled out a microphone. It was a small, unauthorized transmitter Saren had given him. He clipped it to his collar. I am not a diplomat, Rylan said. His voice wasn't booming like Malcor's. It was scratchy, tired, and distinctly human. But through the hackers in Saren's network, it was being broadcast on every frequency, bypassing Malcor's sensors. I don't know how to speak in poetry, Rylan continued. And I don't have a magic tale. But I know how to fix broken things. He looked up at the doctored footage, still playing on the screens. That video is a good story, Rylan said. It makes you angry. It makes you feel safe because it gives you a villain you can understand. A dirty human. A traitor. He turned to face Malcor. But ask yourselves one question, Rylan said. Why does a glorious empire which claims to be the strongest power in the galaxy need to lie about 2 young women dying? The crowd quieted slightly. The question hung in the air. 5 years ago, Rylan said, his voice rising, gaining strength. I was on that bridge. I didn't hold a gun to anyone. I held a hand. I held the line because the command came from this plaza to detonate the gate and kill us all. Silence him, Malcor shrieked, slamming his fist on the console. Cut the feed. You can cut the feed, Rylan shouted, but you cannot cut the truth. Does a great empire need to build its foundation on the corpses of its own children? Is your peace so fragile that it requires the blood of your princesses to hold it together? Rylan ripped open his coat. He didn't show a weapon. He showed the scar on his chest, the starburst mark of the Foxfire resonance. He says I am a monster, Rylan roared. He says I kidnapped them. Then explain why the Foxfire lattice, The soul of your civilization chose me to carry its weight. The scar glowed. It pulsed with a blinding white-gold light that was visible even from the back of the plaza. A gasp went through the crowd. Resonance marks were holy. They could not be faked. They could not be stolen. Malkor saw the shift. He saw the soldiers lowering their rifles, confusion replacing the rage. He was losing them. "Enough," Malkor hissed. He pressed his hand flat against the interface panel. He didn't just activate the martial law protocol. He entered a sequence that had been dormant for centuries. Execute protocol. Purge the infection. The ground shook. It wasn't an earthquake. It was the plaza itself waking up. The geometric channels in the obsidian floor turned from a gentle orange to a violent, sickly violet. "What is happening?" Kiora cried out, grabbing Elira's arm, as the dais shuddered. "The lattice," Saren shouted, looking at her datapad. "He is weaponizing the environmental grid. He is turning the city's power supply into an offensive discharge." From the four corners of the plaza, massive pillars of energy erupted. They arched upward, meeting directly above the dais, forming a cage of violet lightning. But the energy didn't stay contained. It began to arc downward, striking randomly into the crowd. Screams erupted. People scrambled, trampling each other to get away from the discharge. "He is attacking the people!" Rylan shouted. "Malkor, stop it!" "They are collateral damage," Malkor shouted back, his voice distorted by the energy field. He looked manic, his blue foxfire turning dark and jagged. "I am cleansing the corruption. If I must burn the plaza to kill the parasite, so be it." A bolt of violet lightning struck the dais, shattering the stone inches from Rylan's feet. The shockwave threw him backward. "Rylan!" Elira dove for him, shielding him with her body as debris rained down. "He has locked the system!" Saren yelled, her fingers flying across her screen. "It is a kill loop. The lattice thinks the crowd is a viral infection. It is building up for a mass sterilization pulse. 30 seconds until discharge. It will kill everyone in the square." "Can you stop it?" Kiora asked, her face pale. "I can't hack it fast enough," Saren cried, fear finally cracking her voice. "The code is ancient. It is too dense." Rylan pushed himself up. He looked at the chaos. He saw the terrified faces of the citizens, the very people who had wanted to kill him a minute ago, now huddled in fear as their own city tried to execute them. He looked at the violet energy cage. It wasn't just energy. It was data. It was the same thing he had felt in the Stormgate. "We don't hack it," Rylan said, spitting blood. "We drown it." "What?" Elira asked. "The resonance," Rylan said, standing up. He grabbed Elira's hand. He reached out and grabbed Saren's hand. "We are the Triad Right. That is what the Oracle said. 3 points of contact." "Rylan, that is suicide," Saren set, her eyes wide. "To interface with a weaponized lattice directly, it will burn your mind out." "I am a mechanic," Rylan said, gripping their hands tighter. "I don't mind getting my hands dirty. Connect with me, both of you. Push everything you have through me into the grid." "We will die," Elira whispered, tears in her eyes. "Then we die doing the job," Rylan said. He looked at Kiora. "Get to cover, Majesty. This is going to get loud." Rylan didn't wait. He closed his eyes and pulled. He didn't pull with his muscles. He pulled with the scar on his chest. He reached out to the burning, screaming energy of the lattice and opened the door. "Now!" he roared. Elira and Saren screamed as they ignited their auras. 9 tails of gold and 9 tails of blue erupted, tangling together, spiraling into a vortex that funneled straight into Rylan's human body. The world dissolved. There was no plaza, no screaming crowd, no Malkor. Rylan was floating in an ocean of fire. It was a chaotic, swirling storm of data. He saw streams of numbers that looked like waterfalls. He heard voices, millions of them, echoing in a vast chamber. This was the Foxfire Lattice. But it was sick. Great jagged spikes of violet corruption were tearing through the flow. The Purge Protocol. It was a rigid, stupid command if target, jar unauthorized, then destroy. Rylan felt the crushing weight of it. It was trying to erase him. It felt like being crushed by a hydraulic press. "Help us," a voice said. It was Elira. She was there, a being of pure golden flame, wrapping around his left side. "The logic is circular," another voice said. Saren. She was a construct of blue ice and geometry wrapping around his right side. "We cannot break the loop. It is self-reinforcing." Rylan looked at the code. To the Kitsunari, this was spiritual. It was holy. They tried to negotiate with it. But Rylan was human. He was an engineer. He didn't see spirits. He saw bad wiring. "It's not a loop," Rylan thought, projecting his voice into the void. "It's a shunt." Malcor bypassed the safety regulators. He looked at the violet spikes. They were rigid, linear, human logic, Rylan realized. Malcor used human coding techniques to build this trap. That is why the princesses can't stop it. They are thinking in circles. He is thinking in straight lines. Rylan Elira's voice was fading. "It hurts. I can't hold it." He felt her pain. It wasn't just physical. It was the despair of 5 years of loss. He felt Saren's fear, not for herself, but for him. "If you die here," Saren's thought echoed. Malcor wins. He writes the history. Rylan focused. He visualized the storm not as a mystical force, but as the engine of a starship. The pressure was too high. The relief valve was stuck. He needed to build a new pipe. "Listen to me," Rylan projected to the twins. "Stop fighting the energy. You are trying to block a tsunami. Don't block it. Change its shape." How the twins asked in unison. "I am the anchor," Rylan said. "I am the hull. You are the fuel. Pour it into me. All of it." "It will kill you," Elira cried. "Your body is carbon and water. You will vaporize." "Trust me," Rylan said. "I love you." He didn't mean to say it. It slipped out, a raw, honest truth that cut through the noise of the data storm. He didn't know which one he meant it for. Maybe both. Maybe the unit they made together. There was a pause in the storm. A heartbeat of absolute silence. "We love you," came the reply. Then the floodgates opened. Elira and Saren stopped holding back. They poured their very souls into him. Rylan felt his consciousness expanding. He wasn't just a man anymore. He was a titan of light. He grabbed the violet spikes of Malcor's code with mental hands. They burned, they seared, but he held them. "You want to flow," Rylan snarled at the energy. "Fine, let's flow." He didn't try to stop the blast. He grabbed the targeting parameters, the code aiming at the crowd, and he twisted them. He wrenched the downward vector and bent it upward. "Go to the sky," he commanded. "Go back to the stars." In the real world, the Foxfire Plaza went white. The violet cage that was crushing the dais shattered. But it didn't explode outward. It reversed. With a sound like a thunderclap that shattered windows for 10 miles, the energy column inverted. The lightning stopped striking the ground and shot straight up into the atmosphere. The clouds above Vulnaris Prime were instantly vaporized. The beam of energy punched a hole through the ionosphere, expanding as it rose until it covered the entire hemisphere. It wasn't a weapon anymore. It was an aurora. Great ribbons of violet, gold, and blue danced across the sky, painting the night, with a beauty so terrifying and majestic that the panicked crowd froze. They looked up, mouths open, the fear forgotten in the face of the sublime. On the dais, Rylan fell to his knees. Smoke was rising from his armor. The circuitry in his gauntlets had melted. But he wasn't done. "Saren," Rylan wheezed, blood dripping from his nose. "Trace it now." The energy was no longer attacking them. It was flowing through them. They controlled the stream. Saren, her eyes glowing with blinding blue light, tapped the air. She didn't need a datapad anymore. She was typing directly onto the fabric of reality. "Got you," she hissed. She flicked her wrist toward the massive holographic screens. The image of the fake dossier vanished. In its place, A live schematic of the lattice appeared. A bright red line traced the origin of the Purge Protocol. It didn't lead to Rylan. It didn't lead to a terrorist cell. The red line snaked through the palace network, bypassed the security nodes, and terminated at a single device. High Regent Malcor's personal command console. The image zoomed in. It showed the authorization key, Malcor Alpha 1. Execute. Silence fell over the plaza. The aurora swirled silently above, casting multicolored shadows on the faces of the people. Every eye turned to Malcor. The High Regent stood frozen. His hand was still on the panel. The red light of the active console illuminated his face, making him look ghastly. "It is a trick," Malcor stammered, his voice thin without the amplification which Rylan had just cut. "A simulation." Rylan stood up. It took every ounce of strength he had. His legs shook. His vision was tunneling. But he stood. "It is not a simulation," Rylan said. His voice was quiet, but in the silence it carried. "It is the receipt." Kiora stepped forward. She looked at the screen. She looked at the man who had whispered in her ear for 5 years. "Guards," Kiora said. Her voice was nice. "Arrest the High Regent for high treason and attempted genocide." Malcor's personal guard hesitated. They looked at their paymaster. Then they looked at the sky where the power of the twins and the human was painting the heavens. They made the smart choice. The captain of the guard tackled Malcor. The High Regent screamed as he was slammed onto the obsidian floor. "You fools!" Malcor shrieked as he was cuffed. "You don't know what you are doing. The system needs control. Chaos will eat you alive." The lattice remembers. It remembers. They dragged him away, his boots scraping across the tiles. Rylan watched him go. The adrenaline that had held him together finally ran out. The connection to the lattice snapped. The aurora above faded slowly, leaving a lingering glow. Rylan felt his heart stutter. The resonant scar on his chest felt like it was burning a hole through his ribs. "Rylan!" He heard Elira's voice, but it sounded like it was underwater. The ground rushed up to meet him. He didn't hit the stone. He hit softness. Elira had caught him. "Stay with me," Elira was crying. Her tears fell on his face, hot and stinging. "Do not dare close your eyes, human. That is an order." "Yes, ma'am," Rylan mumbled, but his eyelids were lead. Saren was there too, pressing her hands against his chest, trying to stabilize his biorhythm with her own energy. "His neural pathways are fried," Saren said, her voice shaking. "He channeled enough energy to power a fleet. His heart is in fibrillation." "Get the medics!" Kiora shouted, kneeling beside them, disregarding her royal robes as they soaked up the blood and soot on the floor. Rylan looked up at them, the 3 faces of the women he had saved and who had saved him. "Did we?" Rylan whispered, his breath rattling in his chest. "Did we win?" "We won," Elira sobbed, stroking his hair. "Look at the sky, Rylan. You painted the sky." Rylan tried to look, but the darkness was creeping in from the edges of his vision. He felt a strange sensation. Not pain. Cold. And in that cold he heard something. It wasn't the crowd. It wasn't the twins. It was a voice from the lattice. Deep. Ancient. A voice he had heard once before 5 years ago in the split second before the Stormgate closed. "The transaction is incomplete," the voice whispered. "One death was owed. One death was deferred. The ledger must be balanced." Rylan wanted to ask what that meant. He wanted to tell Elira that he was scared. But his mouth wouldn't work. The last thing he saw before the blackness took him completely was the symbol on his shoulder, the 9-tailed fox. It seemed to be laughing. Then there was nothing. High above the palace in the fading trails of the artificial aurora, a single satellite drone remained focused on the unconscious body of the human. In a deep space listening post far beyond the borders of the Kitsunari Empire, a screen flickered to life. A shadowed figure watched the feed. The triad is formed, a synthesized voice noted. The anchor is active. Phase 2 begins. The screen went black. But on the plaza, the cheers had started again. Not for the Empress. Not for the twins. Rylon, Rylon, Rylon. The chant grew until it shook the very foundations of the palace. The human veteran had fallen, but the legend had just risen from the ashes. The imperial prison of Vulnaris Prime was designed to hold titans. It was deep underground, buried beneath layers of granite and dampening fields, a place where the light of the sun and the light of foxfire could not reach. High Regent Malcor sat in his cell. It was a stark white cube, illuminated by harsh, sterile strips. He had been stripped of his council uniform, wearing instead the gray jumpsuit of a common prisoner. But his posture remained erect, his spine a line of unbreakable steel. "You look diminished, Malcor," Empress Kiora said. She stood on the other side of the energy barrier. She was not wearing her crown. Her robes were simple, dark mourning silk. Malcor looked up. His blue eyes, once burning with the fierce intelligence of a predator, were now flat like a frozen lake. "I look like a man who lost a game of chance," Malcor replied, his voice calm. "Do not mistake circumstance for defeat, Majesty." "You tried to murder my daughters," Kiora said. Her voice did not rise. It was heavy, weighted with the terrifying gravity of a mother's betrayal. "You tried to burn the capital to hide your crimes." "I tried to excise a tumor," Malcor corrected gently. "Humans are dangerous. The lattice is dangerous. I was the only one willing to make the hard choices to keep the engine running. You enjoyed the stability I provided, Kiora. You slept soundly for 5 years because I kept the monsters away." "By becoming one?" Kiora asked. Malcor stood and walked to the barrier. He placed his hand against the humming field. "Look at the data streams, Majesty," he whispered. "The records the human exposed. They show I tampered with the logs. Yes. They show I ordered the purge. Yes. But look deeper. Look at the authorization timestamps." Kiora stiffened. "I did not act alone," Malcor said, a cruel smile touching his lips. "The Council approved the budget for the memory wipes. The military high command signed off on the Stormgate protocols. And you signed the executive order declaring the file sealed for galactic security. You didn't read it, perhaps. You chose not to look. But your digital signature is there, Kiora. Next to mine." He leaned in his breath, fogging the energy field. "If I fall, the whole system falls," Malcor warned. "You cannot put me on trial without putting the throne on trial. We are bound by the same lie." Kiora stared at him. She wanted to scream. She wanted to deactivate the barrier and tear him apart with her own claws. But she knew he was right. The silence of the throne had been the soil in which his poison grew. "Enjoy your cell, Malcor," Kiora said coldly. "I will not let you drag the future down with you." She turned and walked away, the sound of her footsteps echoing in the long, dark corridor. Malcor watched her go, and for the first time a flicker of genuine worry crossed his face. Not because of her anger, but because she had walked away without denying it. In the Royal Medical Wing the silence was different. It was the silence of held breath. Rylan Ward lay in a biostasis tank. He was suspended in a translucent blue gel that glowed softly. Wires and tubes snaked into his skin, monitoring a heartbeat that was dangerously erratic. His body was a map of trauma. The burns from the plaza were healing, thanks to the accelerated regeneration tech. But the internal damage was severe. His nervous system, forced to conduct enough energy to power a starship, was frayed. But inside his mind, there was no silence. Rylan was dreaming. He was back in the Stormgate. The violet singularity swirled around the ship, tearing at the hull. The bridge was shaking so hard, his teeth rattled. "Malcor ordered the purge!" Elira shouted over the roar of the dying engines. She was at the navigation console, her hands bleeding light. "They are going to fire the catalyst missile. We have 30 seconds before this whole sector becomes a supernova. Rylan looked at the tactical display. The countdown was ticking. 0029. 0028. We can't jump out, Saren said, her voice trembling, but her hands steady on the controls. The gravity well has us. If we try to leave, the gate collapses and takes the twin flame with it. Rylan looked at them. They were young. So young. They were princesses' symbols, but right now they were just two scared girls facing the end of the world. We don't leave, Rylan said. The memory was sharp now, crystal clear. We become the plug. He grabbed the interface cables. He remembered the searing pain as he jammed them into his suit ports. He remembered the look on Alira's face, horror mixed with awe. Rylan, no, she screamed. Listen to me, Rylan shouted, his voice echoing in the dream and the memory alike. I can't channel Foxfire, I'm human, but I can ground it. You two pour everything you have into the gate. Overload it. But instead of letting it explode, use me as the conduit to feed it back into the lattice. It will erase you, Saren whispered. The energy transfer will burn your identity out of the system. You will be a ghost. Better a ghost than a corpse, Rylan grinned. It was a terrified, manic grin. Do it now. They had done it. They had grabbed his hands. The triad was formed. And in that moment of white fire, Rylan hadn't just fainted. He had negotiated. He remembered a voice. Not the girls, not Malcor. A voice from the deep lattice. Payment accepted, the voice had rumbled. The debt is transferred. Rylan thrashed in the tank. Bubbles of oxygen spiraled up around his face. The monitors spiked red. Stabilize him, Dr. Nix shouted, adjusting the flow of sedatives. Alira stood by the tank, her hand pressed against the glass. She looked exhausted. Her fur was unkempt, her eyes red-rimmed. She hadn't left his side in 3 days. He is fighting the dream, Alira whispered. He is back there. His brain activity is off the charts, Saren said, looking at the holographic readout. She was sitting in a chair nearby, surrounded by data pads, but she wasn't reading them. She was just watching the lines of Rylan's life flicker. He is remembering the parts we forgot. The door to the medical wing opened. Empress Kiora entered. She looked older than she had 3 days ago. The confrontation with Malcor had drained her. Mother, Alira said, not turning around. How is the prisoner defiant? Kiora said. She walked over to the tank and looked at the floating human. He claims we are all complicit. Saren stood up. She picked up a data pad and handed it to her mother. He is right, Saren said. Her voice was flat, devoid of the usual diplomatic polish. Kiora looked at the pad. It was a decrypted file from the Central Archive. It was dated 5 years ago. Subject operation, Stormgate closure. Authorization, High Council. Status approved. Executive signature, Empress Kiora autosign. Kiora stared at her own name. Autosign, she whispered. I was in mourning. Malcor brought me stacks of documents. He said they were relief efforts, pension funds for the widows. I signed them all. You signed the order to classify Rylan as a deserter, Saren said mercilessly. You signed the order to erase his service record. You signed the order that let Malcor rewrite history. I didn't know, Kiora said, tears welling in her eyes. I swear, Saren, I didn't read them. That is the problem, Mother. Alira spun around, her golden eyes blazing. You didn't look, you let your grief blind you, and Malcor used your blindness to build a cage for the whole galaxy. Rylan isn't in that tank because of Malcor. He is in there because of us, because we let the lie happen. Kiora stepped back as if slapped. She looked at her daughters, warriors, survivors, women who had grown up in a hell she had helped create. I failed you, Kiora whispered. You failed him, Alira said, pointing at the tank. We survived because we had each other. He was alone. For 5 years he lived in a scrapyard thinking he was a coward because the Empire told him so. And we let it happen. The silence in the room was suffocating. "What do we do?" Kiora asked, her voice small. "We tell the truth," Saren said. "All of it. Not just Malcor's crimes. Ours." "If we do that," Kiora said, looking at the floor, "the people may demand the end of the monarchy. They may demand my abdication." "Then let them," Illyra said. She turned back to the tank, placing her forehead against the cool glass. "I would rather be a citizen in an honest world than a princess in a lie." Later that night, the medical wing was quiet. Dr. Nix had retired to his office to monitor the readouts remotely. Kiora had gone to her chambers to prepare for the announcement. Illyra pulled a chair up to the tank. She watched Ryland's chest rise and fall in the slow rhythm of the stasis breathing. "You are an idiot," she whispered to the glass. "A stubborn, reckless human idiot." She traced the line of the scar on his chest through the glass. "We were trapped in the event horizon for 3 days before the rescue ship found us," Illyra said softly, as if telling him a bedtime story. "Saren tried to calculate the oxygen reserves. I tried to conserve heat. But we were freezing. The void is so cold, Rylan." She paused, swallowing the lump in her throat. "But then I felt it. A warmth. Not fire. Just presence. It was you. You were miles away, ejected in that pod brain, scrambled and dying, but through the lattice you were holding on to us. You kept us warm." She leaned her head against the tank. "I survived because I wanted to find the source of that warmth. And when I found you in the plaza, looking like a lost stray dog in that terrible coat, I knew I hadn't just lost a pilot. I had lost my compass." From the shadows of the doorway, Saren watched. She held a cup of caf in her hands, untouched. Dr. Nix walked up beside her quietly. "She loves him," Nix observed. It wasn't a question. "She wears her heart on her sleeve," Saren said, her voice tight. "It makes her a good warrior. She fights for what she loves." "And you, Highness?" Nix asked gently. "Where do you wear your heart?" Saren looked at Rylan. She remembered the way he had looked at her during the strategy sessions, not with awe, but with understanding. He saw the burden of her intellect. He saw how heavy it was to always be the smartest person in the room. "I wear mine in a safe," Saren whispered, "locked away where it cannot be used as leverage." She took a sip of the cold caf. "I am jealous, Doctor," she admitted, the words tasting like ash. "Not just of Illyra, but of him. He has a clarity I will never have. He sees a problem and he throws himself at it. I see a problem and I see 10,000 outcomes. He makes it look simple, to just be brave." "Bravery is not the absence of calculation, Princess," Nix said. "It is the decision that the calculation doesn't matter." Saren looked at the tank. "If he dies, Nix, if the system burns him out, I will burn the lattice down myself. That is a calculation I have already made." "Let us hope it does not come to that," Nix said. Just then, a commotion at the door broke the heavy mood. A royal guard, a young fox with eager eyes, poked his head in. "Highnesses, urgent message from the outer rim sectors." Illyra jumped, wiping her eyes quickly. Saren stepped forward instantly, composing herself into the mask of the strategist. "What is it?" Saren asked. "The broadcast," the guard panted. "The Aurora event, it was seen. Reports are coming in from 50 systems. The people are not rioting. They are celebrating. But the governors are panicking. They are demanding to know who is in charge. Half of them want to pledge loyalty to the human avatar. The other half are mobilizing fleets to restore order." "Civil war," Saren muttered. "The vacuum of power Malcor left is already being filled by chaos." "We need a statement," Illyra said. "Now, before the fleets launch." "Who gives it?" Saren asked. "Mother is writing her confession. If she speaks now, she looks weak. If we speak, we look like we are usurping her." They looked at the tank. The only person who could unite the factions was floating in blue gel, unconscious. "We have to wait," Saren decided. Stall them. Tell them the Avatar is meditating. Tell them the Empress will address the galaxy at dawn. The guard nodded and ran off. Alira looked at Saren. Did we just lie? We bought time, Saren corrected. There is a difference. Then, a light chuckle came from the doorway. You two are terrible at this conspiratorial thing. It was Ryland's voice, but not from the tank. They spun around. The tank was still humming. Ryland was still inside. But standing in the doorway, leaning against the frame, was a spectral projection of Ryland. He looked healthy, wearing his old coat, but he was translucent, glowing with a faint white light. Ryland, Alira gasped. Sort of, the ghost Ryland said. He looked down at his hands. I think I am currently projecting my consciousness via the local Wi-Fi. It's a weird feeling. Tastes like copper. You are astral projecting, Saren asked, her scientific mind reeling. Through the lattice. I guess, Ghost Ryland shrugged. Look, I heard you talking. About the fleets. About your mom. He walked or floated into the room. Don't let her take the fall alone, Ryland said. His voice echoed slightly. Malcor built the trap, she just stepped in it. If she goes down, the whole structure collapses. You need to pivot. Pivot to what? Alira asked, reaching out to touch him. Her hand passed through his chest. She shivered. To a partnership, Ryland said. The Triad. That wasn't just a combat maneuver. It's the new government. He looked at Saren. You said you wanted to restructure the system. This is it. No more absolute monarchs. No more shady council. 3 pillars. The crown, the heir, and the anchor. The human, Saren finished the thought. A representative for the outsiders. Exactly, Ryland said. It balances the equation. The people won't revolt if they see one of their own at the table. And the governors won't attack if they think the lattice itself is backing the New Deal. It is brilliant, Saren admitted. And insane. That's my brand, Ryland grinned. Then he flickered, his image distorted like bad reception. Ryland, Alira cried. I'm running out of bandwidth, Ryland said, grimacing. My body, the meat version, it's waking up. And it hurts. A lot. He looked at Alira. His expression softened. By the way, princess, he whispered. I heard what you said. About the cold. And the compass. Alira blushed furiously, her tails puffing up. And Saren, Ryland, looked at the strategist. You don't need to lock your heart in a safe. It's safer with us. He flickered again, violently this time. Wake me up, Ryland commanded. I have a headache and I really need a drink. The ghost vanished. Inside the tank, Ryland's real eyes snapped open. He thrashed his hands, slamming against the glass. Get him out! Dr. Nix shouted, hitting the drain release. The gel drained away. The glass hissed and slid open. Ryland tumbled out wet, shivering and gasping for air. Alira and Saren were there, instantly catching him, wrapping him in thermal blankets. He coughed, spitting up fluid. He looked up at them, his eyes bloodshot, but alive. Did I miss the party? He wheezed. You are the party, Alira laughed, crying, and hugging him tight, not caring about the slime. Someone get him clothes, Saren ordered the nurses, though she was smiling a rare, genuine smile that reached her eyes. And get the Empress. Tell her the Triad is in session. An hour later, in the private solarium. Ryland sat in a wheelchair, wrapped in a robe. He held a mug of hot stimulant. Kiora sat opposite him. The twins stood on either side. A Triad Accord, Kiora mused, looking at the hastily drawn schematic Saren had prepared. Power shared between the throne, the military heirs, and a civilian anchor. It ends the absolute rule of the Kitsunari, Kiora said softly. My ancestors would weep. Your ancestors are dead, Ryland said bluntly. And they didn't have to fight machine swarms or wormhole gods. The galaxy changed. The throne has to change with it. Kiora looked at him. She saw the new mark on his face, a faint, white geometric pattern that traced from his temple to his jaw, a permanent scar of the resonance. "You have given much for this family, Rylan Ward," Kiora said. "More than we deserved." "I didn't do it for the family," Rylan said, looking at Alira and Saren. "I did it for the people in it." "Then I agree," Kiora said. She stood up. "We will announce the Triad Accord. We will dissolve the High Council and arrest the conspirators. And we will invite the Human Coalition to send delegates to the new Senate." She walked to the window, looking out at the city. The lights were coming back on. The violet aurora was gone, replaced by the gentle dawn. "But, Rylan," Kiora said, turning back. Her face was serious. "There is one thing you must know, before we go public." "What?" Rylan asked. "The voice you heard in the lattice," Kiora said. "The one Malcor was afraid of." Rylan froze. "How do you know about that?" "Because Malcor didn't write the Purge Protocol," Kiora said. "He found it. It is older than the Empire. The lattice is not just a machine. It is a graveyard. And the things buried in it do not like to be disturbed." Rylan felt a chill that had nothing to do with the stasis gel. "Are you saying the lattice is alive?" "I am saying it is hungry," Kiora said. "And by becoming the anchor, you just rang the dinner bell." Rylan looked at his hand. The faint white glow of the resonance pulsed under his skin. "Great," Rylan sighed, sinking back into the wheelchair. "I saved the galaxy. I get the girl or girls, it's complicated. And now I have to fight a haunted internet." Alira put her hand on his shoulder. Saren put her hand on his other shoulder. "We fight it together," Alira said. "And we bring heavy artillery," Saren added. "Fair enough," Rylan said, closing his eyes. "But first, can a guy get a sandwich I haven't eaten in 5 years plus 3 days?" The room erupted in laughter, a tense, relieved sound. But beneath the laughter, the shadow of Kiora's warning lingered. The war with Malcor was over. But the war with the truth was just beginning. In the depths of the lattice, deep within the code strata, where no biological mind could reach, a subroutine woke up. It analyzed the data from the Foxfire Plaza event. It tasted the unique signature of the human Kitsunari hybrid energy. Anomaly, detected triad anchor established. Protocol 001, awaken the Starweaver. A signal was sent, not to a planet, but to the dark space between the stars. Something ancient shifted in the void, and it turned its gaze toward Vulnaris Prime. The silence in the private solarium of the Flametail Palace was heavier than the gravity of a neutron star. The dawn was breaking over Vulnaris Prime, painting the shattered skyline in hues of bruised purple and hopeful gold. But inside the room, the shadows of the past 5 years still lingered. Rylan Ward sat in a high-backed chair, his chest bandaged the fresh white scar of the resonance, pulsing with a faint, rhythmic light that matched his heartbeat. Opposite him sat Empress Kiora, her hands folded in her lap, her knuckles white. To his left and right stood Princess Alira and Princess Saren, their usual armor replaced by soft ceremonial tunics, making them look less like warriors and more like the young women they had been before the war stole their youth. "We need to talk about the voice," Rylan said. His voice was raspy, the after-effects of channeling a planetary power grid still coating his throat like ash. "The one Malcor was afraid of. The one I heard in the Stormgate." Dr. Nix, the Imperial Oracle, stepped forward from the shadows of the bookshelf. He held a crystalline data slate, his old eyes troubled. "We have been analyzing the logs you extracted from the High Regent's console, Master Ward," Dr. Nix said. "And we have cross-referenced them with the ancient texts of the Starweaver mythology. What you heard was not a hallucination." "I know it wasn't," Rylan said, looking down at his hands. "It offered me a deal." Alira moved closer, her golden tail twitching with anxiety. What kind of deal, Rylan, in the ship you just told us to push the energy? You didn't say anything about a negotiation. I didn't have time, Rylan admitted. He closed his eyes, letting the memory wash over him. It was no longer fragmented. It was terrifyingly whole. When we hit the event horizon, Rylan recounted, the physics started to break down. The ship wasn't just falling into a wormhole. It was falling into a consciousness. Malcor's order was to destroy the gate, but the lattice. The thing living inside the energy didn't want to be destroyed. It wanted to be completed. Completed, Saren asked her strategist's mind, latching onto the word. It told me that the storm gate wasn't a weapon, Rylan said. It was a bridge that had been built incorrectly. It was unstable because it lacked a grounding element. It needed a fuse that could handle two opposing realities, the linear, stubborn reality of a human and the fluid, chaotic energy of the Foxfire. He looked up at Kiora. It demanded a price, Rylan said softly. It said, give me an anchor and I will close the wound without killing the host. I was the anchor. I accepted the role. But the lattice warned me. It said that to become the anchor, I had to cease to exist in the old world. I had to be erased so I could be rewritten. Dr. Nix sighed a long, rattling sound. The law of equivalent exchange. To create a new form of life, which is what you are now, Rylan, the old life must be sacrificed. So, Rylan said, a bitter smile touching his lips. Malcor didn't just erase my files to cover his tracks. The lattice wanted me erased. Malcor was just the tool it used to balance the books. That brings us to the first unpleasant truth, Saren said. She walked to the center of the room, projecting a hologram from her datapad. It showed a history of the Empire, spanning 3,000 years. I have been digging into the deep archives, Saren said. Malcor claimed he did what was necessary to protect the Empire. He was arrogant, but he wasn't entirely lying. Look at this. She pointed to a series of red spikes on the timeline. Every 200 years there is a conflict, Saren explained. A civil war, a border skirmish, a plague, and every time the Foxfire lattice expands afterward, it grows stronger, more complex. Are you saying the lattice starts the wars? Alira asked, horrified. I am saying the lattice is an immune system, Saren corrected. And like any immune system, it triggers fevers to kill infections. It saw the stagnation of our empire as a disease. It allowed the war with the machine swarms to happen to force us to evolve. It allowed Malcor to rise because his cruelty forced us to confront our own moral decay. That is monstrous, Kiora whispered. It is a machine god playing with lives. It is a system, Rylan said, understanding dawning on him. It doesn't care about morality. It cares about survival. It sacrificed me. It sacrificed the twins' childhood, and it sacrificed your grief, Majesty, just to update its operating system. Rylan stood up, wincing as his muscles protested. He walked to the window. But that doesn't explain everything, Rylan said, turning back to face the Empress. The lattice might have set the stage. Malcor might have written the script. But someone had to sign the production order. The room went cold. Kiora did not look away. She sat straighter, though her eyes were filled with tears. You mean the memory wipes, Kiora said. I mean my life, Rylan said. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut deep. After the ship was recovered, after we were pulled out of the wreckage, I was in a coma for 3 weeks. Malcor came to you. He told you that the human pilot was a complication. He told you that for the stability of the realm, the narrative had to be clean. The princesses died heroes. The human died a coward. It was a perfect tragedy. Rylan walked closer to her. You signed it, Kiora. I saw the digital signature on the log Saren found. It wasn't an auto-sign. It requires a retinal scan to authorize a level 5 identity purge. Alira gasped. Mother, you told us you didn't read them. I lied, Kiora said. The confession hung in the air like smoke. I read it, Kiora said, her voice trembling but clear. I sat in my office looking at the report. I knew you were alive, Rylan. The medics told me. But Malcor whispered that, if the truth came out that a human had saved the royal heirs using foxfire, the Church of the Flame would revolt. The purist factions would attack. He said the Empire would fracture just as the war ended. She looked at Rylan, pleading for understanding but not asking for forgiveness. I had just gotten my daughters back from the dead, Cura said. I was terrified. I was weak. I looked at your file. You were a conscript. No family. No planet to go home to. Malcor said you would be given a new life. A quiet life. He promised you wouldn't be hurt, just relocated. And forgotten. So you traded me, Rylan said. You traded my name, my memories, and my honor to buy peace for your throne. Yes, Kiora whispered. I chose my daughters over a stranger. I chose my empire over one soldier. It was a sin. I know that. I have felt the weight of it every day for 5 years. Rylan stared at her. He wanted to scream. He wanted to break something. For 5 years, he had lived in a scrapyard hating himself, thinking he was a deserter, who had abandoned the only people he ever cared about. And the woman he had saved had authorized his torture. Rylan, Elira, stepped between them. Her hand hovered over his arm, but didn't touch him. Don't. Don't what? Rylan snapped, turning on her. Don't be angry, don't ask why the people I killed treated me like garbage. No, Elira said, her eyes fierce. Don't think she was the only one. Rylan froze. What? Elira looked at Saren. Saren nodded slowly, her face pale. We knew, Saren said. Rylan felt the floor drop out from under him. You knew. Not at first, Elira said quickly. When we woke up, Malcor told us you had died of your injuries. We mourned you, Rylan. We cried for weeks. But then about a year later I felt you. Through the bond. I knew you were alive. I hacked the medical archives, Saren admitted. I found the transfer order. I saw that you had been shipped to the Outer Rim with a memory block. And you did nothing, Rylan said. His voice was hollow. We wanted to, Elira cried, tears streaming down her face. I wanted to take a ship and burn the galaxy down to find you. But Saren stopped me. I calculated the outcome, Saren said. She stood rigidly, like a soldier facing a firing squad. Malcor had total control of the Council. If we had tried to find you, he would have killed you to keep the secret. As long as you were forgotten, you were safe. You were alive. So we made a pact, Elira said, her voice breaking. We agreed to let the lie stand. We agreed to let you be the villain in the history books and let you live a miserable life in a scrapyard because it was the only way to keep you breathing. We are all guilty, Rylan, Saren said. Mother signed the order to save the Empire. We kept the secret to save you. But in the end, we all used you. Rylan looked at the three of them, the Empress, the warrior, the strategist, the three most powerful women in the galaxy. And they were all looking at him with the terrified eyes of people who had been trapped in a trap of their own making. He turned away. He walked to the door. Rylan, Elira called out. I need air, Rylan said without looking back. Don't follow me. Rylan stood on the landing pad of the East Wing. The wind whipped at his coat, a new one made of velvet and nanoweave given to him by the palace staff. He hated it. He missed his grease-stained canvas. He looked down at the city. The lights were twinkling. People were going about their lives safe, fed happy. They didn't know their peace was bought with lies. He felt a presence behind him. He didn't need to turn. The resonance in his chest hummed. I told you not to follow me, Rylan said. I am not following you, Saren's voice said. I am standing on my own balcony. You are just occupying the view. Rylan turned. Saren was standing there, holding 2 glasses of amber liquid. She offered him one. It is vintage, she said. From the vineyards of the third moon. It costs more than that scrapyard you lived in. Rylan took the glass. He drank it in one swallow. It burned, then settled into a warm hum. "You calculated that I wouldn't leave," Rylan said. "I calculated that you are a pragmatist," Saren said. She leaned against the railing, looking at the stars. "You are angry. You have every right to be. But you also know that leaving now solves nothing. Malcor is gone, but the power vacuum is huge. If you leave, the factions will tear the Empire apart trying to claim the anchor." "Is that all I am to you?" Rylan asked. "A strategic asset." Saren turned to look at him. The moonlight caught the sharp angles of her face, softening them. "In the storm gate," Saren said quietly, "when we formed the triad, I saw your mind. Not just your thoughts, your feelings." She took a step closer. "I saw that you didn't save us because of duty. You didn't save us because you wanted to be a hero. You saved us because you were lonely." Rylan stiffened. "You saw two people who were just as trapped as you were," Saren continued. "And you decided that if you were going to die, you didn't want to die alone. That is why the Lattice accepted you. It didn't need a soldier. It needed a family man who had no family." She reached out and touched the scar on his chest. Her hand was cool, but the energy that flowed between them was hot. "I am a strategist, Rylan. I look at variables. And the variable I cannot balance is how much I missed you when I thought you were dead." Rylan looked at her. He saw the crack in her perfect armor. "And Alira?" Rylan asked. "She is the fire," Saren said, a small smile playing on her lips. "I am the ice." "You need both. Too much fire you burn. Too much ice you freeze. You are the hearth, Rylan. You hold us both." Alira landed softly on the balcony railing. She had jumped from the floor above. She dropped down beside them, her eyes red, but her chin high. "I am done apologizing," Alira said. "I made a choice to keep you alive. I would make it again. But I am also done hiding." She grabbed Rylan's hand. "We are a mess," Alira said. "My mother is a guilt-ridden monarch. My sister is a manipulative genius. I am a walking flamethrower. And you are a human mechanic with a god-complex scar on his chest." "Sounds like a terrible sitcom," Rylan muttered. "It sounds like a family," Alira corrected. "A broken, stitched-together dysfunctional family. But it is ours." Rylan looked at them. He felt the anger draining away, replaced by the exhaustion of 5 years of running. He realized he didn't want to run anymore. He wanted to fix things. And this was the ultimate repair job. "Okay," Rylan sighed. "But if we are doing this, if we are building this triad thing, we do it my way." "Which is?" Saren asked. "No more secrets," Rylan said. "We tell the galaxy everything. The lattice, the lies, the deal. If they want to burn the palace down, let them try. But we face it standing up." "Agreed," Alira said. "Agreed," Saren said. The great hall of the Flametail Palace had not seen a gathering like this in 1,000 years. The hologram projectors were off. The doors were open. Representatives from every sector, Kitsunari nobles, human union leaders, insectoid, hive queens, and silicon collectives stood in the physical space. Kiora stood before the throne. She was not wearing the heavy crown of the First Flame. She was bareheaded. "Citizens of the galaxy," Kiora began. Her voice was unamplified, forcing the room to fall into absolute silence to hear her. "For 5 years I have ruled you with a lie." She told them everything. She did not blame Malcor. She took the blame onto herself. She spoke of the Stormgate of the fear, and of the decision to erase a hero to maintain an illusion of stability. When she finished, the silence was terrifying. Then Rylan stepped forward. He stood next to the Empress, not below her. Alira and Saren stepped up to his sides. "The Empire you knew is dead," Rylan said. "It died in the Stormgate. What came back was something else." He activated the resonance. The scar on his face and chest glowed. At the same moment, the twins flared their foxfire. The three energies merged gold-blue and white, forming a pillar of light that shot up into the vaulted ceiling, connecting with the palace's node of the Foxfire lattice. The room gasped. They could feel it. The truth. The lattice was no longer a hidden system. It was broadcasting the raw, emotional data of its leaders directly to the people. "We are not offering you a ruler," Saren said, her voice amplified by the lattice itself. "We are offering you an accord." "The Triad Accord," Elira announced. "The throne will protect the culture, the heirs will protect the borders, and the anchor," she gestured to Rylan. "I will protect the truth," Rylan said. "I am the check and balance. I am the one who can turn the lights off if they start lying to you again." A murmur of approval rippled through the human and outsider delegations. For the first time, they saw a guarantee of their safety that wasn't just a piece of paper. "And," Kiora added, stepping forward to stand beside Rylan, "I surrender my absolute authority. All major decisions must be ratified by the Triad. The age of the solitary Empress is over." She took the crown of the first flame from the pedestal. She didn't put it on her head. She placed it on the table in front of them. "Let us begin," Kiora said. The weeks that followed were chaotic, loud, and messy. But it was a good kind of mess. It was a mess of reconstruction. The Triad Accord became the new constitution. The Foxfire lattice was patched. Rylan used his connection to open the code, allowing scientists from all races to study it and ensure it wasn't manipulating history anymore. They found the immune system protocols and neutralized them. The lattice would still protect them, but it would no longer decide how they lived. Rylan found himself in a new role. He wasn't a king, and he wasn't a general. He was the anchor. He spent his days in the council chambers, arguing over trade tariffs and terraforming budgets. He used his mechanic's brain to dismantle bureaucratic gridlock, the same way he dismantled engines. "You are surprisingly good at this," Saren remarked one evening as they walked through the palace gardens. "It is just plumbing," Rylan said, loosening his collar. "Politics is just moving sewage from one place to another without it leaking on the carpet." "A poetic metaphor," Saren laughed. They stopped by a fountain. Elira was there practicing her forms with a light spear. She stopped when she saw them sweating and grinning. "Are you two done boring each other with tax laws?" Elira asked. "We were discussing sewage," Rylan said. "Romantic," Elira said. She walked over and wiped her forehead. "By the way, Mom wants to see us. On the main balcony." "Is something wrong?" Saren asked, instantly alert. "No," Elira said, her eyes softening. "I think she just wants to say thank you." The sun was setting over Vulnaris Prime. The sky was a masterpiece of orange and violet natural colors, not the sickly glow of a weapon. Kiora stood by the railing. She looked different, lighter. Since sharing the burden of power, the years seemed to have melted off her face. The two spectral tails that represented her dead daughters were gone. In their place, her aura was full and bright, all 9 tails burning with a steady, calm warmth. Rylan, Elira, and Saren joined her. "It is beautiful, isn't it?" Kiora said, looking at the city, "when you don't have to be afraid of it." "It is not bad," Rylan admitted. "For a planet that tries to kill you every other Tuesday." Kiora turned to him. She reached out and placed her hand on his shoulder. It wasn't the heavy hand of a monarch knighting a subject. It was a gentle, grounding touch. "I never had a son," Kiora said softly. Rylan froze. He looked at her. He saw the regret in her eyes, but also the hope. "And if I had," Kiora continued, "I would have wanted him to be like you, stubborn, rude, and entirely unwilling to let me fail." She looked at her daughters. "You have chosen well," Kiora said to them. Elira smiled, stepping up to wrap her arm around Rylan's waist. "He is a handful, Mother. We are still training him." "I am untrainable," Rylan protested. "We will see," Saren said, stepping to his other side, linking her arm with his. "I have a 12-year plan for that." Rylan laughed. It was a real laugh, loud and echoing. He looked at the three women. He looked at the foxfire lattice shimmering in the sky, no longer a cage, but a net of stars connecting them to 1,000 worlds. He thought about the scrapyard. He thought about the nightmares. And he realized they were fading. The silence in his head was finally filled not with screams, but with this. "So," Rylan said, "what is the next crisis, an alien invasion? A black hole? Or do I have to attend another gala dinner?" "Dinner," Kiora said firmly. "And you will wear the sash." "I hate the sash," Rylan groaned. "It matches your eyes," Elira teased. "It matches your soul," Saren corrected. "Chaotic and in need of ironing." Rylan shook his head, looking out at the horizon. "I was dead," Rylan whispered more to himself than to them. "I died in that gate," Elira squeezed his hand. Saren leaned her head on his shoulder. Kiora's hand remained warm on his back. "You died," Elira whispered back. "And the man who came back is the one we needed," Rylan smiled. He closed his eyes and felt the lattice hum, not as a master, but as a part of him. A triad of heartbeats synced with his own. "Yeah," Rylan Ward said, the human anchor of the Foxfire Empire. "I guess I can live with that." Behind them, the three tails of Foxfire Gold Blue and the new strange white of the human soul intertwined, burning bright against the coming night.